thrilling news that we're coming to you. We're coming to our folks special here live on this on a Monday. Yeah, we don't normally do a show like this, but big news just broke. Something that really matters for what we've been doing here at the PewterCast. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. How are you?
I am better now that I have you here live with me, because that got scary for just a few minutes.
We had sort of a computer snafu when we did the InstantCast last night. After we recorded, near the end, I couldn't hear Brent through his headphones, and we didn't think anything of it because we have technical issues time to time. We always figure it out. And then Mike Smith gets fired, and I text Brent. I'm like, "Can you jump on YouTube?" Because I was going to do a video. I'm like, "Can you jump on YouTube?" Around 3:00 to do a live video about Mike Smith and who's going to replace him and how's it going to look. And he's like, yeah, I can. It's got to be short, which this probably will be about a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get back on together, and I can't hear him again.
Still same thing, yeah.
So we decided to restart our computers, and mine just started doing an update.
Right.
So now I am going through my phone. I hope it looks good. Hope it sounds good. But we're about 10 minutes a little later than we thought we were going to be.
Yeah.
But hey, we're here.
Yeah, we had one of those. I call it a Doc Brown moment. You remember at the end of what's that movie? Back to the Future. Yeah, like he's sliding down the pole and he grabs this end of the thing and he grabs this end and just at the last minute he clicks it together and sends Marty back to the future. That was horrible.
That was great. That was awful.
That was bad. Well,
Doc Brown's an East German.
I would like to say hi to everybody who is joining us very quickly over in Mixlr and on YouTube. Everybody in the chat rooms, you guys are awesome. Thanks for joining us. And Ren, the big news. It's something that we have been calling for the last 2 weeks and change now. Lots of people have actually been calling for this for a lot longer than even we have. But defensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Michael Smith, has been relieved of his duties. Coach Duffner, Mark Duffner, as we said it should be, has been elevated to the defensive coordinator position. Dirk Cutter has just had his press conference. I really hope that you got to listen to that, and
I did.
Great. I only caught a very little bit because I was putting all this together really quick because that's how fast this whole thing has happened. So let's start with it, Ren. Mike Smith fired out as defensive coordinator. Go.
It's a little shocking, especially the timing, because just a few weeks ago after the Chicago game, the Monday, so I guess we've been 2 weeks to the day after the Chicago game, Dirk Cutter basically came out and said, not so many words, I'm not firing Mike Smith. And something that didn't sit well with me, which was surprising because usually I like Dirk Cutter's answers. I'm like, okay, I can see that. But his reasoning was, well, now what? Okay, right. You fire him, so now what do you do? And it's like, everyone's answer was promote Mark Duffner.
Right.
If you don't like that, do Brinson Buckner. I don't know, bring in Jack Dow, do something.
Literally can't get worse. You're at the bottom of the league. You literally can't do worse.
And you were talking about how, basically what you're doing is you're accepting mediocrity.
Yep.
You're not doing everything you can as a head coach to put your players in a position to win or trying to help your team win. So, it would have been the perfect time because it was the bye week. So you had 2 weeks, 1 week of the coach, putting his spin on it in the lab, so to speak, in the offices, and the players come back for the next week. You get an extra practice that week, and you get to implement the game plan for Atlanta that you've been working on for a week. So you had 2 weeks to do it. But I guess, Cutter had seen enough. In the press conference, he did say that it was, and I'm glad someone asked, was this your decision? And he said yes.
Right. Which, by the way, is expected. That's the coach's answer, that he should say he's the guy. He's the guy standing there. He's the guy who takes responsibility, right?
Yeah, that's what you would think. But from, 2 weeks before, like I've said, basically saying I'm not firing Mike Smith because we don't have a plan after that. And then one game later, it's like you're fired. I don't think it'd be too out of the realm to think that Jason Light through the Glazers or maybe just Jason Light himself, had that conversation, which we have talked about, like, hey, Dirk Cutter, are you willing to lose your job for Mike Smith?
Hmm.
Because this is what it's come down to.
Right.
But Dirk Cutter said that it was him, and he said that that he told Jason Light about it. He didn't go into details, which I don't mind. He said it should be kept private, and I agree.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, he informed Mike Smith. So if we believe Dirk Cutter, he goes to Jason Light and says, "Hey, I'm firing Mike Smith," and Jason Light goes, "Okay, it's your coaching staff. Do what you want." And then he
Hmm.
informed the players, and then it leaked out in the media about 20 minutes before his press conference.
Now, see, there's because people are actually talking about this in our chat room right now. This was the Glazers' work that Pete over in the YouTube chat room says he doesn't think that Cutter really had a choice. And here's the deal, because in the last, I mean, how long has it been since the news broke? Maybe an hour at this point, hour and a
Yeah,
half, if that. Um, that I've seen a lot of people talking about this, and here's the deal: whether it was the Glazers came down and mandated it, Light came in and mandated it, or Cutter came in and mandated it, it doesn't matter. Cutter had to have at least signed off on this, because if he had, like, let's say the Glazers came in or even Light came in and said you have to fire Mike Smith, and Cutter stuck his foot in the ground and said no, and they said okay, fine, you'll be fired too. Well, okay, like Cutter had to have agreed on some level, like, okay, we'll
yeah,
fire him, and personally, you know, Cutter's not going to go out there and say, hey, we had this big game plan, we had this big thing. I've got to imagine that I don't think Cutter went into the Atlanta game with a plan to fire Mike Smith if it didn't work out. I do think that I mean, obviously, and I have no special knowledge. This is just common sense. The conversation had to have been had at least between Light and Cutter. And I don't know how much contact Cutter has with the Glazers during the season at all, if any.
right. Hmm.
Certainly Light has that kind of I think he has like a weekly conference with the Glazers, and as he should. So obviously this is something that has been spun, and to me, this really probably went down a lot like the Roberto Aguayo conversation that we saw on Hard Knocks. Cutter and Light sitting in the office talking about it, saying, "Well, what do you want to do? Something has to be done. Do we sit here and go around?" And I'll tell you, as far as what they did and the timing, because I'm with you on the you could have fired him last week and had the extra week. You could have done
Hmm.
that. This is strangely reminiscent to me, though, of the Doug Martin situation. And what I mean by that is, we all got to, and by we, I mean the fandom, the media, the fringe media, the whatever, we all got to this spot where we're like, okay, we're done. Done with Doug Martin. We're done with whatever. We're done with Mike Smith. And Cutter, I think it took him a bit to get there. And then he sort of had his, okay, here's your last straw, right? Remember that game he went in to, was it the Packers game last year with Doug Martin? And he put Doug Martin in there for the first half, and then he put Peyton Barber in there for the second half. Exact same game, exact same O-line, exact same defense, and kind of did an A-B test and said, okay, who wins? And Peyton Barber clearly won that particular game. It's just reminiscent of that to me of, yes, this whole thing sucked from the Chicago Bears. He's on really thin ice with me. I'll give him one more chance to see if he can't pull this out. If this is and I don't know that we would have done that. I'm just saying he seems
Right.
to, it's like he gives people that one last chance. And if they hang themselves, then Cutter's right to pull the thing. And he does. And that's what this feels like to me. Does that sit with you at all? Or am I just hanging out here on a limb by myself?
No, he talked about it a little bit, because that was like a big question. It's like, well, 2 weeks ago you said you're not firing him, and here we are one game later, and you're firing him. Like, what changed?
Hmm.
And uh, but I guess the bigger question was why not 2 weeks ago?
Right.
Or right after the Chicago game. And Cutter talks about it. He said, like injuries, and uh, he thought they had a good game plan for Atlanta. It basically reading through, I
Hmm.
guess reading between the lines would be that, yeah, you're right. This you got one more chance and you blew it right away.
Hmm. Yeah.
You
He
know,
just,
and,
there's nothing he could do with
and
it.
yeah, so it's basically, yeah, it was kind of how it
Yeah.
went.
And I mean, for whatever it's worth, because this will probably be the last time we really talk about this. This was the right call. it was the right call. It might have been a little bit later than it should have been done, but it's certainly better to do it now than to wait till the end of the season. And we have certainly been on record with that. Lots and lots and lots of people, lots of media, fringe media people have all been on record. So with that, Mike Smith is out. The best
Yeah.
offseason signing of 2017, 2016, between those two seasons. But he is out. Apparently, he'll have the remainder of his contract to be paid. I mean, he's not out money at this point.
Yeah. Don't feel bad for.
Yeah,
Mike
don't
Smith.
feel bad for Mike Smith. I mean, I
don't
hate
feel
to see
bad for
people
Mike
get
Smith.
fired, but he's still getting paid. His severance package will be nice.
I don't hate to see people get fired. I hate to see people get fired for unjust reasons.
Right. We do have people asking in the chat room if the phone lines are open. Unfortunately, no, the phone lines aren't open. This happened so quick that just don't have that set up.
You're gonna have to just blast off and chat. And,
right.
And Brett, because now I'm on my phone doing this with Hangouts, I can't see the YouTube chat. So if
I'm
you
watching.
throw out some. Yeah, he's watching it. So,
yeah.
Some good topic comes up or a question you need answered, we can go ahead and do it. But I have pulled up Mark Duffner's rankings as a defensive coordinator when he was with Cincinnati.
Okay, now here's the question, because this is something that people are also talking about in the chat room is
sure.
Okay, is Duffner the right next person? Now, as far as the staff here, as far as right now, I think Duffner is. And the question that I've had, and maybe you can help me with this,
sure,
is because what I have read in the official statement from the Buccaneers that our friend Scott Smith wrote and other people, officially they just said Duffner has been promoted to defensive coordinator. What they haven't clarified with that is he just the interim, meaning they plan to conduct a more thorough search in the offseason, or has he been promoted defensive coordinator, and unless he really sucks it up and they fire him here in the offseason, it's going to be Duffner going forward? Do we know?
Well, yeah, but I don't think it matters. I mean, you can call him defense coordinator, interim defensive coordinator. It's pretty much everybody on that coaching staff right now is relying on Duffner in the defense. If the defense turns it around, I think the offense stays at least sort of where they're scoring, and the Bucs put up a lot of points and can win some games and maybe get into the playoffs, and everyone's job is saved.
Right.
If the Bucs have a winning record after this firing and the defense looks okay, I still think everyone's job's safe, because you have that built-in excuse of, hey, basically we had, we had a 5-game. We should be 4-1 if we had a middle-of-the-road defense.
Right. And, right. And if this hadn't completely imploded and they actually had this same defense throughout the entire season, you're right. I do think that this bodes. It does act as sort of that built-in excuse, as you said. Should the wheels come off of this season and things just go horribly wrong for the rest of the season, especially on defense, I don't know that it will be depending on how the rest of the season goes, I don't know that it's enough to save Cutter's job, but it is certainly a part of it. However, before we get to Duffner, because I do want to talk about him, let's stay with talking about Dirk Cutter though. He goes through the process of giving up play calling, makes the offense better. He makes a hard decision, albeit a little late. He does make the hard decision to let go Mike Smith and make a midseason change, which is it's an ill-advised thing to do, generally speaking, anyway. But sometimes it just has to happen, and this was one of those cases.
Right.
Does this bode well for Dirk Cutter staying on as a head coach for going into, would it be his fourth season next year? What does this do? What does this say for Dirk Cutter, and how he's running the team and what he's doing to turn the Buccaneers into a winning franchise?
I think, he's had to make some tough decisions, and I think, eventually that they've all been right. Going back, we can go back to, you say, when you were talking about Doug Martin, he eventually got that one right. It looks like he got the one right about letting Monken, make the play call, and it doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter how bad Duffner is. The sample size for Mike Smith's defense was there. Like, a change had to be made.
Right.
You could have made an argument for a change in the offseason. You could have made an even bigger argument during the bye week. But, the change has been made, and it doesn't matter. These decisions don't matter unless they work out. I
Hmm.
think they've worked out with Peyton Barber. I think it's worked out with the offense. But if the defense continues to stink it up, Dirk Cutter might be okay because the offense is doing so well.
Hmm.
But if the offense starts to fall off and the Bucs, put up less than a 500 record, it doesn't matter what any of them do or what any of these decisions makes because I think once Cutter's gone, that pretty much wipes out his entire coaching staff.
Right. So, what do you think Cutter does? Because he has gone on record saying a lot of times, almost to the point of he just sort of lets the defense do their own thing, right? Like, because
Right.
I do the offense, they do the defense. I just kind of sit in on their meetings every once in a while and I let them do their thing. You think, especially now having given up the play calling, the in game play calling for the offense, giving him a little bit more flexibility, do you think? Do you think he's a little bit more in control, a little more maybe supervisory of what's happening with the defense as the season goes forward?
I mean, I'm sure he's in on the defensive meetings and the game plan, but I don't think he's a part of it. He's been an offensive guy his whole entire life.
Right.
He's never been on defensive meetings. He can they'll all he knows about defense is what they're trying to do to the offense, which is really it's very similar. It's kind of close,
Hmm.
but he's never broken down film, or rarely, I should say. I shouldn't say that. He's never broken down film from the defensive side of the ball. Like, this is how we're going to exploit the offense from the defense. He doesn't do that. He goes,
Hmm.
this is how we're going to exploit the defense from the offensive side. And he's done that for his whole entire coaching career.
Hmm.
He was a quarterback in college. It's always all been about the offense. So I don't know if he has the knowledge to make corrections. He can make suggestions and
Sure.
ask, like, hey, why aren't we doing this? Or how come let's try this? And tell me why or why not this may work. But to get in there and go, hey, Duff, I'm going to take over the defensive game planning. I just don't think he has the knowledge to be able to do that.
Right. But I mean, because like I would imagine when he's on headset with Munkin, it may be something to the like they're talking back and forth, and Cutter may even say something like, "Hey, let's run a pass play here, or let's run a whatever," and then Munkin has 15 different plays he can choose from that he actually picks one to call. Like I wonder if Cutter might even be doing something like that a little bit more with Duffner of, hey, let's run a quarters coverage on this one, or what are you thinking about here? Um, I'm just wondering. I don't know. I don't because you're right. He certainly has been an offensive guy. You would think he knows some defense. I mean, he has to in
But
order to
yeah,
game plan
he
against
knows
it.
more defense than I do, or you do, or ever
Sure.
will.
Right.
But as far as to be able to put together an NFL defensive game plan,
Hmm.
I mean, he can make suggestions. Sure, hey Duffner, you know, as an offensive coach, I'm telling you what the Falcons are trying to do to you,
Right.
and that's about as far as it goes. You know, or what helps to stop that quarters coverage.
Hmm. Right. Right.
Or one man deep, or
Right. So
but
that's
as
what I
far
mean.
as
So
but if
he is.
he can make suggestions, but I
Yeah.
think all head coaches do that.
Sure.
But as far as like getting on the like Lovie Smith took away the defensive calling duties from Leslie Frazier.
Hmm.
I don't see Dirk Cutter ever doing that. And I don't really see Dirk Cutter getting on the headset at a point in the game and going, hey, you need to run single man high like this play or this drive, or
Sure.
if they
Sure.
get inside the 20.
Sure.
And you can't. It's part of being a good job or a good boss or a good manager. You hire these people to do their job, let them do their job,
Right.
and you
And
have to trust them to do it.
yeah, and I didn't mean to imply that he would be that involved. Just again, like I said, kind of because he's not worried about the offensive game planning, he can be in those headset conversation with them. All right. So anyway, that's Cutter. We'll see what he does going forward. I'll be interested to see how this plays out for sure. But let's talk about our new brand spanking new defensive coordinator, who, by the way, Ren, by the way, just to remind people, he was last year's PewterCast Award winner for Coach of the Year, Mark Duffner, defensive coordinator slash linebackers coach. I did hear Cutter say something that he would remain as the linebackers coach, so he'd kind of be pulling double duty with this. But you said you were looking up something about Mike about Duffner and his stuff.
Yeah, he was the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Hmm.
Uh, he was head coach of Maryland, head coach of Holy Cross. His Holy Cross record's like phenomenal. Um, but so and this is total box score Like I don't know who's been injured. This is like box score scouting. Like I don't know who was injured. I don't know who they played. I don't know, you know, what the quarterback was, or like any of their defensive players were injured, or maybe every team they played, their starting quarterback was down. Like so, there's a lot of stuff to go into this. But in 2000, before he took over, when he was just linebackers coach of the Bengals were 21st in points per game and 22nd in yards. So bottom third of the league. The next year, where he took over as defensive coordinator, they jumped up to 14th in points per game and ninth in yards. Now that, okay, that's good. That bodes well. It's kind of, knows what he's doing. Well, unfortunately, the year after that, they were 32nd in points given up, and they came in 17th in yards. So that's just sort of a quick look at where the Bengals ranked, overall in defense. Those seem to be the two big stats that everyone looks at as far as defense. So one year was really good, and one year was really bad. One year was really good with marked improvement. One was really bad. Now, I don't know the marked improvement year, the year before, which would have been 2000. Like I said, was like the entire defense hurt, kind of like what the Falcons are going through, or maybe even could say the Bucs are going through right now. And then they all got healthy, and then they got hurt again, or then they all got healthy, and then his scheme, like people just figure out his scheme the year after that. So there's a lot to go into it. But if you're watching this, you're wondering like, hey, like his one shot as defense coordinator, how'd he do? He had a good year, a very good year. I would say above average year, and then he had a not so good year. The yards were average, but the points were the most. So I guess that's a lot of short fields. That could have been a lot of turnovers by the offense.
I was going to say, is there any mitigating factors that you can see off your quick search there that would explain the drop off between year 1 to year 2?
No. I mean, not sort of right off the bat here. This was just a very quick sort of like, hey, here's where they ranked when the turnovers don't seem to be. Well, it looks here. It says the year that he was 32nd in points, it looks like the team had 35 turnovers and only generated 20. So that's good and bad. It's like, okay, well, they had 50 more turnovers, but the defense in a bad spot. But then 20 turnovers for the season is terrible. So, and that was 31st in the league as far as defensive turnovers. So, yeah. So, like I said, it's just box score scouting. But just I know people, because that was one of the first thing I wondered was, well, how did he do as a defensive coordinator? And but his first year, they were 16th in turnover, got 28 turnovers, and like I said, 14th in points against, and 9th and top 10 in yards against. So he had one really good year and one not so good year.
So a couple of people in the chat room are saying, and I guess the reporters are in open locker room right now, or maybe they just came out of open locker room. Ren, this may or may not make you happy, or may make you laugh. Apparently, Gerald McCoy, instead of holding court, declined all interviews to talk to the media.
I'm not shocked.
I would think probably most players are probably decline. I would think a lot of them are.
JPP's like doing his all access at Hooters tonight, and I really thought about going down there and seeing if I could get 5 minutes with him.
Yeah, but that'd be cool.
I decided against it.
Oh, okay, sad. Yeah, don't. Yeah, probably good, smart move there.
Yeah, if I think it would be a lot easier if Mike Smith just didn't get fired.
You mean like if there'd been a little bit of time, a little bit of separation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like if I want to go down and talk to JPP and say, hey, how do you like the new defense? Are you figuring out? Is it everything you expected to be? Sort of that type of thing. But now Mike Smith's fired. Like if I went down there, I wouldn't be surprised to find like 2 or 3 of the beat writers there.
Sure.
Like looking to get a one-on-one with JPP afterwards. At least if I had credentials,
sure,
and he knew my face, I'd be down there.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going down there just as a fan, just to be there. Not just for JPP. I mean, honestly, any of those guys.
Or you can listen to it on the radio.
But I like to be there with them. Um, Ren, there is a question for you specifically in the chat room. Our friend
Okay.
Corey over at the Play Reaction wants to know if you have been banned from the bowling alley after your last incident there.
I have not been banned from the bowling alley, and I've not been banned from Pewter Report uh, events either.
Hmm.
I just did sort of catch an earful, and it wasn't a bad earful. Like Mark Cook was like, "Look at this guy." He called me Geraldo Rivera. He's like, "Hey, Rivaldo, like, what do you do?" Like, but what I found interesting is he said that I was disguising myself as a fan, and I
Who
looked at
did?
him like, "I am a fan."
Who? Oh,
Like,
Cook said that?
Cook said that. I'm like,
Nice.
"I am a fan. I appreciate that you think I have enough knowledge where you consider me sort of one of your peers, but dude, I'm just cam and some broadband. Like I, don't- I am a fan. That's why I'm asking these questions.
Right.
But no, yeah, no, they didn't ban me, and I apologize to Trevor and Mark and Scott Reynolds all there at the bowling alley, and they all said don't worry about it. And I even said sorry to Chris Conti when he was walking out, and
Hmm.
he didn't care either. He's like, "Hey, don't even worry about it, man."
So we have a couple of people in the chat room who are asking about this bowling alley story. I'm not going to ask you to recount it, but I want to say that this particular story happened. I mean, it's been recently. We've just told this story. Do you remember when?
Yeah. When was that? Um,
For those of you asking, it's in a recent episode, like within the last 2 weeks, maybe.
I think it was the last email episode. What do we
Okay,
call that again?
it's
The
our
viewer
final
list
thoughts. It's final
final thoughts.
thoughts,
Yeah,
emails, comments, questions, things like that. So go back and check that out in the podcast feed. It's back there. To everybody who's in the chat rooms between Mixler and YouTube, we are not taking phone calls. We are going to wrap up here in just a few minutes. But if you have any questions, go ahead and drop it in the chat room. I will see those and we'll get those out there. If you have a comment or question, go ahead and drop those in there. Our friend Derek over at the Oversell podcast has just jumped in. He's echoing what a lot of us say. It had to happen. Had to happen. Siege the Bay over in Mixler asked this question, and I think this is a
sure.
fair question. I don't know the answer to this, but if Duffner is just the interim, and they
Hmm.
do conduct a full search here in the off season, who do you maybe have your eye on potentially as a new defensive coordinator for the 2019 season?
Well, Jack Del Rio is one that pops in my head, and I've been saying that they should have brought him in previous to this
Hmm.
because with their coach Cutter, it seems to be it's always relationships. It's not necessarily going out and finding the best person for the job or the the new hot up and comer from college football or somewhere in the NFL. It seems to be, hey, and this goes with his players as well. If
Hmm.
there's a huge trust factor,
Okay.
so if you have coached with Dirk Cutter before on the defensive side of the ball, somewhere in his many stops throughout his 30 plus years coaching football, I think all those people have a huge head start against Joe Schmo off the street, even
Hmm.
though he might have a really great resume as well. It's because he's worked with them and he knows how they work. He knows they can work with them. They're not going to butt heads, and he trusts them. And trust is a huge thing. I mean, we see it. Like I'm to the point where I don't even know why Jacquizz Rogers has a roster spot.
I
He's
Yeah.
he's like a bottom five kickoff return guy. And
There was a point.
Peyton Barber now picks up the blitz well enough where his spot doesn't. There's no reason to have him active.
Right. And there was a point in yesterday's game. It was late in the game that I saw Jacquizz Rogers back there picking up the kickoff. And I'm thinking in my head, why is Jacquizz doing this right now? Isn't this why we put Deshaun Jackson back there? Like game
Right.
situations like this right here. This should have been Deshaun, not Jacquizz Rogers. Like,
Yeah, we needed a big return,
yeah,
and he caught it like at the 10 and made it to like the 18 and
25. Yeah.
ran right into the pile.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I
And
mean,
it was that was the deciding factor for me. It's like, why is he on the team?
yeah.
Like, okay, so he doesn't fumble a kickoff. You know what? Neither do I. I don't fumble a kickoff either. I'll
Yeah.
catch it every time. I guarantee it. I got good hands, man.
Right.
But I sure as hell don't need to be on an NFL football team or the Buccaneers or be taking up a roster spot from somebody.
Yeah. We have a question about Noah Spence if we think he'll get on the field a little bit more now, a little bit more playing. I tend to think that this has a little bit more to do with Buckner
Agreed.
than it
Yeah.
would Duffner. I mean, if Buckner says Noah Spence is, Coach Cutter comes to his guys and says, "Okay, I need 8 defensive linemen. You've got 11 on the roster. Who's out?" And Noah, it's Buckner who's making that call ultimately. I think.
Well, it was.
Well,
I
maybe not
actually
ultimately,
asked
but
Mike Smith that question when we were in training camp.
you
You
did.
know,
Yeah, that's right.
I did because Jay Hayes was in charge of all the line calls last year, or I
Hmm.
guess last year, and we saw that the stunts weren't working, the twists weren't working, all the games they were playing up front weren't working. So I asked Mike Smith, I'm like, is Buckner going to be given the I guess latitude or be allowed to make his own line calls? And Mike Smith said no. And he goes, but everyone will be involved in the game plan. And he, alluded to the fact about the because I asked him another question about the rotation. The same 8 guys aren't going to be up every week, is what he told me.
Hmm.
Like certain guys have certain skill sets, and if they can be used more against a certain team, then they will be put ahead of other players with other certain skill sets that, hey, next week might be in front of that person because of what they're trying to do along the defensive line. Just an FYI, I have like 10% of battery left.
Yeah, no, it's time for us to wrap this up anyway. So let's hear final things. A couple people saying Jim Schwartz. A couple, our friend Trevor says, let's take the next 11 games and figure out if we need a new head coach before we start worrying about who the new defensive coordinator is. Which is fair, but
I disagree.
it. What I mean by that um, and I what I mean by that is, after we get done here, I don't care to talk about the next defensive coordinator really until we get to that part of the season. Um,
Yeah,
because at this point it's Mark Duffner until we get to the
and it
end.
will be. It will
Right.
be, and it will be for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's no changing it from here.
Right.
They could bring somebody in to help, like Jack Del Rio,
Hmm.
but as far as changing the DC again, no. This is the one. This is your one day of bliss, Buck fans.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have all of that. Chad says we need an innovator, someone who has a new plan to adjust for what the NFL is turning into. Um, and lots of that.
That's a
So,
good
okay,
point.
with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and actually wrap up this show. Ren, any final thoughts on Mike Smith as the now former defensive coordinator, and more specifically, Mark Duffner as our new defensive coordinator here as we sign off?
It'll just be interesting to see what Duffner does. Sort of what his base coverage is.
Yeah.
Is he going to make Brent Grimes play up more?
Hmm.
Is he going to make MJ Stewart in the slot pay up more?
Hmm.
There were many times in that Atlanta game where it was like 3rd and 8, and everybody was dropping back past the down markers, and it's
Right.
like what are you doing? It'll be see if they're more aggressive. It'll be interesting to see if there's more linebacker blitzes. Him being the linebackers coach,
Right.
to get his guys more involved of of the pressure game. It's going to be it would be interesting to see him and Buckner sort of in the same room coming up with the defensive game plan.
Hmm.
Those both very big personalities.
Is Duffner a big personality? I mean, no
Oh yeah,
question about Buckner, but is Duffner really a big
oh
personality?
yeah. He's a yeller, screamer, a
Okay,
cusser.
cool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so here's kind of my final thought. A lot of people talking about it in the chat rooms. I've seen it out on social media already as well. As don't think that this defense is going to change. You're not going to change the scheme mid-season. You're not going to do all these kinds of things. I think that that's wrong, and here's why. Every single one of us has had the experience of being in a job and being a subordinate to somebody else and going, man, if I was the manager here, this is how I'd do it different. And if I ever got my shot,
Right.
this is how I would do it different. Mark Duffner is no different. There has had to have been plenty of times he sat back and said, man, why is he calling the scheme this way? Or why is he doing this? He's the defensive coordinator. I'm here to work for him. But now that he's there, he has his ideas and he has the ways that he wants to do some things. So I do think that we are going to see a lot of changes. It may not be a full systemic reset of the defense. That's probably not going to happen as well. But I do
Yeah.
expect to see
Vita Vea is
definitely
not
some
moving
change.
to slot corner.
No, right. But I mean, I do expect to see some things. Bucks Princess has just jumped into the chat room. I'd like to say congratulations, Bucks Princess, on everything going on in your life. So she's having a baby boy. So
I know.
so congratulations. Sorry, I just looked over and saw her over there. So anyway, um, but I think that's kind of my final word. I'm excited. I think this was the right move at the right time. I commend Dirk Cutter. Wish he would have done it sooner, but it happened. And now moving forward, Ren, on to who do we got next? We got the Browns. We got the Browns coming in. We will be back later this week. We will have our final thoughts show on the Atlanta game. This news right here is sure to color that show. Go ahead and, Ren, we've already received a ton of emails, like 3 of them just since this particular news has broken. So if you guys want to send
Oh,
an
wow.
email, we will have probably a very large show where we read all those emails and we have our fan interaction show, that final thought show. You can do that to the pewtercast@gmail.com. We would love to do that. And of course, you can reach the show at the pewtercast on Twitter and on Facebook as well. Ren, where can they find you out there if they want to talk about Mike Smith a little bit more with you?
Best way to find me at Twitter or on Twitter at Rendax, REN_DAXT. I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football. It's a new day in Tampa Bay.
New day in Tampa Bay. I am at Brent Allen Live across all the social medias. If you guys want to get in touch with me, I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us live. We had more people doing this than we did at our InstantCast last night. So thank you to everybody who joined us. And we can't wait to talk to you guys again. And until then, go Bucs.